Is everybody ready to get started? Thank you for coming. We appreciate it, and hopefully we can make this informative for you. And we're going to try to keep it from 6 to 8 and let you get out of here at 8. And we'll try to keep it pretty tightly scripted that way. And also want to thank PATV for coming, as they're filming this tonight, so this will be on cable channel as well. And you'll also have it available for replay on the Pine Tree. We had about 70 questions submitted, and we're going to run basically the top 10 list tonight. Variations, you know, lots of times you end up with 3 or 4 different variations of the same subject. We're going to try to run this in a pretty low-key manner. We're going to run the questions. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to answer the question. We are going to time it, but we're not going to, if they go 5-10 seconds one way or another, we're not going to screech and yell too much, because these are law enforcement guys, right? They got to, I mean, you know, they're on that, yeah. So we thank you, and with that, I guess we'll get started. Should we start with the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let me get stuff started here. All right, get the recording started. Thank you, guys. Thank you for running. I probably should have said this in my when I was facing the other way. But one of the things from following elections over the last few years is people should be appreciative of those who choose to run. It's not easy, and you know that. And not only do you become the product, your family becomes the product at times, and everything else during the duration of it. And thank you to all of you guys for running and for caring enough about your communities and everything else to put your hat in the ring. And we're going to start out with, basically, we had a question that was kind of an opening statement tease, but basically you guys are going to have 3 minutes to each of you to do an opening statement, and however do you want to do it. Do you want to do it, let's see, should we go your right to left? Should we start that way? Does that work?
Whatever you want to do.
All right, let's run it that way. And 3 minutes, does that work? 3 minutes opening statement, and we're going to run 3-minute questions, and we'll turn it in. And there we go. If you're ready to go.
Okay, good evening. I'm Pat Garahan, and I'm a candidate for Calaveras County Sheriff. Take a few moments to tell you a little bit about myself. Been involved in policing in one way or another for about 40 years. I started out as a military policeman in the Marine Corps. After I got out of the Marines, I worked in Flagstaff, Arizona as a patrol officer for about 5 years. In 1985, I went to the Oakland Police Department. Spent the next 23 years of my career there. Started out as I graduated first in my academy class there. I started out as a patrol officer. I was selected as a K-9 handler just 2 years later. I spent 14 years in that job. I also spent 5 of those years working undercover in narcotics, working my way up to a federal task force. I went back to patrol. I ran the K-9 unit as an officer for 5 years, give or take. I was promoted to sergeant, where I was a supervisor on the midnight shift in East Oakland. I was in charge of officers, supervised crime scenes, critical incidents, that sort of thing. I was promoted to lieutenant, went back to patrol on the midnight shift by choice. And I was the watch commander, which basically means I was the senior police person for a city of about 400,000 people when I was on duty. All police activities I was responsible for during that time. After I retired, I began working as a contractor with the Department of Defense as a police subject matter expert. I deployed to Afghanistan twice with Marine Corps infantry battalions as their police expert. When I came back, I taught at Delta College in their Administration of Justice program. I'm currently the police science instructor at Calaveras High School. I've got associate and bachelor's degrees in criminal justice, and I've got a master's degree in criminology. As far as running for sheriff, I've got no baggage with the sheriff's office here. I'm not part of what's been perceived as the good old boy system at the top. I bring a fresh set of eyes to the sheriff's office. I'm confident enough to ask, why have we always done things that way? And also confident enough to not try and change things that are working correctly. I have real, actual leadership skills and experience. I've been in charge of people. I've been in charge of funding. I've been in charge of dogs. I've been in charge of equipment. I have a lot of expertise that I bring to the job. I've been a subject matter expert. I taught in the academy. I was expert in report writing various narcotics, patrol procedures, canine procedures, and use of force. I also have a reputation of the ability to work with others despite differences and get things accomplished. And that's what I'll bring to your sheriff's office. Thank you.
Good evening. It's a little closer. I want to first off thank my lovely bride for enduring this and allowing me to continue on with this. She went through the appointment process when our Sheriff Gary Coons passed away, so she's done this twice in the last couple of years, and I thank her very much for that. And thank you, John, for putting this event on, and you folks for coming out to listen to us and get a perspective on what's going on in the county. This is a very important position, and I'm glad you all showed up. I moved into the county in 1978. My father-in-law bought the Dorrington General Store. That's what brought me to the county out of the Bay Area. While in the county, I worked in the logging industry, I worked in the trucking industry, and I worked in the automotive industry. I took a little bit of time and started working in the hazardous waste industry, doing cleanups, and at times managed over 100 people and ran multi-million-dollar jobs in the hazardous waste program. When I started in your sheriff's office, I worked all areas of the county. I became the school resource officer. I did that for about 3.5 years. I covered all 17 schools in the county. There's 19, 2 of them are Angels Camp. I covered the rest of them throughout the county. During my time as the SRO, I was living in Angels Camp, and I fostered and raised 8 foster kids in this county. So my commitment to this county is big. I promoted to corporal, started training new deputies. I worked in the patrol division as a school resource officer and as a patrol deputy. And as your current sheriff, I'm still working with the schools now, and now I'm working with the district's administrations. We're working to get our school programs safer. I have kids in school here too, so we all need to do that. I understand the critical needs of our community for school safety. I've dedicated sending all of our deputies to crisis intervention training. I've been on the SWAT team for close to 13 years, handling a wide variety of critical incidents, giving me a large and wide perspective on how to handle critical incidences. I was an investigator for 6 years with the department. My law enforcement career has only been with this sheriff's office. I worked for everything from petty thefts to homicides. Although I was never an actual narcotics investigator, because our community and our sheriff's office is so small, I worked a lot of investigations related to drug crimes. I promoted to sergeant and supervised a patrol shift, and then I moved on to the position where I am now as your sheriff in 2016. As your sheriff, I reinstated the inmate worker program, which puts inmates to work. It gives them a sense of self-worth while accomplishing community cleanup projects for y'all. If you see Cosgrove Creek, it was cleaned up, and that was done by our inmates in the county. I reinstated the bike team, which we've utilized for some special enforcements, and we use them in our parades. I reinstated the school resource officer, which I was one again at one time. I'm in the process of putting another school resource officer into our program. I've added another canine unit. We had one, we've got 2 now. I've added investigators to aid in solving more crimes. I started the marijuana enforcement team, which, as you well know, has been very active and will continue to be active. I started the Rural Crimes Task Force, and I continued the resident deputy program that Sheriff Kuntz started many years ago. The resident deputy program is important because it gets the deputies out in the community, and the community in those areas get to know that deputy. It makes a good connection. I've been effective in adding additional deputies by working with our Human Resources Department. We're sending recruits to the academy. We're hiring a lot of these kids that are in our county to send to the academy. They have a vested interest in that county. It's going to help us retain people, so they're not going to want to leave. Their families are here, their roots are here, so that's a benefit for us. That'll add to our patrol numbers, which will ensure that crimes are responded to faster and safer for our community. I've worked with our HR department and our CO to add additional correctional officers to our jail. Our jail staff has been low since this new jail was built, and we've been able to add to that staffing. And we're still working on adding more to that. I've worked solely for this department and being dedicated to Calaveras County while working alongside the other 57 sheriffs. I've worked very closely with 10 of those different sheriffs to give me a broad perspective on things that are going on in their communities and how we can adopt some of their ideas into our community. I'm utilizing social media. A lot of you folks seeing us on social media. We talk to the news media quite a bit. We're trying to get all information out to everybody in a timely fashion. My budgeting background that I have in the hazardous waste industry and being the Sheriff's Association, Deputy Sheriff's Association president for numerous years, I'm very familiar with the Sheriff's Office budgeting program. I've added a budget analyst. That's going to ensure our being fiscally sound so that we're spending your money wisely. I'm now going into my third budget cycle for this county. And I utilize my staff's experience, and there is a lot of experience in the department. So, thank you very much.
Could you definitely stand up and speak with any feedback there?
Absolutely. Hold the mic.
Can you hear me now?
He wants you to stand up. So you can
Stand
see.
up? Yeah. Wow, that's. My name is, excuse me, my name is Gary Stevens. Thank you to John from the Pine Tree for hosting this. I know there were several conflicts with other organizations that have usually done this in the past, so John stepped up and he did this himself because he understands this is an important issue. And thank you all for coming to this tonight. This is good. This is an opportunity for you to vet and to hear all three of us, and you get to pick your sheriff this time. My background, where I come from, is I live in this community. I've lived here almost 30 years. I've been in law enforcement my entire adult life, right out of high school, going to community college and studying administration of justice. I graduated with 3 two-year degrees and then went through the police academy. After the police academy, suffered kind of almost a debilitating injury, almost did not make it into law enforcement, but I was finally accepted into the U.S. Border Patrol Academy. After the academy, I was assigned to the Chula Vista Station. After the Border Patrol, I came to Calaveras County, where I worked patrol. I worked as an FTO. I worked as a detective. I worked narcotics, as a hostage negotiator, and a search and rescue manager. I was also a resident deputy in Arnold from 1995 to 1997. I left Calaveras County and I went to work for Amador Sheriff's Office for 5 years. There again, I worked narcotics, I worked patrol, and I was a hostage negotiator. After 5 years at the Amador Sheriff's Office, I went to work for the Amador County District Attorney's Office, where I'm still employed as a DA investigator. My experience has taken me from not only as a sheriff's officer or a sheriff's deputy, but as a DA investigator. And what I do currently is I investigate crimes full-time. That's all I do. I keep apprised of new laws and how those laws apply to the community and how they're interpreted by the court system. Getting back to why I'm running for sheriff because we all know, we've all seen the degradation of the quality of life we're losing in Calaveras County. We have people that are leaving the county for various reasons. Primarily, a lot of it has to do with marijuana, influx of marijuana, commercial marijuana, and the problems associated with that. Currently, the board has initiated a ban, which is now, some people are starting to see a ray of hope. I am the only candidate who sits before you that has been pro-ban, and I've announced that for almost a year now. My position is simply, I want to lead this department into the future, and being a leader is not just about the next election, it's about the next generation. So when I say that I'm a leader, I'm looking to lead this department into the future because I keep apprised of the laws, I keep apprised of the latest current trends in law enforcement, and because this is where my heart is. My wife grew up here, my kids go to school here, I am invested in this county. My wife and I, we belong to several organizations, Mountain Ranch Community Club, Friends of the Fair, Historical Society, several others. I don't necessarily get to go to every meeting, but we still stay vested in the county and we participate in the county. Not to advertise ourselves, but because that's what we do. We give back to the county that we live in. I'm part of this community, I know this community, and I participate in every function I possibly can when I'm not working. So I ask for your support, I ask for your vote, and thank you very much.
All right, and we'll get started here. The first question is kind of been top of mind because it's been top of news lately. So it's on school safety. And the difference is, I think, is in our area on school safety is we have some very rural schools. So hopefully in answering this question, you also explain how the policy on trying to keep, West Point, Railroad Flat, Hazel Fisher, type that stuff as well. Question, with school safety top of mind, how would the Sheriff's Department, under your direction, implement a school safety program, including elementary schools and areas of lengthy response times? And we'll just go right to left for this one when we switch it up, but let's start with it.
Okay, as far as keeping our schools and our kids safe,
Stand up.
that's something I'm already doing as a teacher at Calaveras High School. What I found as far as school safety and what the Sheriff's Office is currently doing about it is purely reaction. We had a drill at school last week that was in direct response to the shooting in Parkland, Florida. Prior to that, it had been over a year before there was any type of a drill regarding emergency response to the school. I've gone over with my students what we would do in a situation. I've drilled them, conducted drills just within our own classroom to emergency response, whether it's active shooter, bomb threat, fire drill, those type of things. I've asked the school administration for a set of safety site plans and the emergency response plan for the school. And I was told we don't really have one. That's something we're working on right now. Prior to the drill that we just put up, I wrote a scenario out on how I felt it should go in response to the current ALICE training, which is the new training for law enforcement and school personnel regarding response to active shooters or other emergency situations like that. I got no response as far as that went. What I would do, or what I will do, is work on getting school resource officers at those schools. Right now, the one school resource officer we have, he's been in my classroom over the past 2 years exactly one time. He has an open invitation, he has my cell phone number, I have his cell phone number to come to the class. Now, it's not his fault, he's just too busy taking care of other things, whether it be on school or running around helping cover other calls out there. So we need more school resource officers. The other thing is each and every school needs a review and an assessment of their emergency site plans, ingress, egress for emergency vehicles, what staff would do, what the students would do, and what law enforcement and other emergency personnel would do. Right now, there isn't anything. If something happened, it would be chaos one way or the other, but it would be more chaos without a plan. So we need to do that right from the get-go. Without a plan, you're not going to go anywhere with it. That takes buy-in from the school administration, it takes buy-in from the parents, it takes buy-in from the community. Because we can't just get school resource officers out of thin air. One of the things I would do right now with budget concerns is there are a large number of retired police officers that live in our county. I would go after them, recruit them. Ideal situation, you had somebody say was a juvenile detective for part of their career. Recruit them as a reserve officer, they wouldn't get paid, come in and give me X number of hours, and you work the schools. And that would be one way to supplement what we currently have. Thank you.
John's got everything taped to the floor here, so we can't move around too much. He doesn't want us to trip. Unbeknown to the two candidates, right now, we actually have something going on in the school districts. I have an SRO right now. We've had that SRO for almost 2 years. I do have another SRO who is getting ready to start in July when our schools come back into session. I'm in the process of working with Angels PD and the Angels Mayor to put an SRO over on the other side of the county also. We do need more SROs. There is actually a bill out there right now that the federal government has put together. The legislators are going to try and get it pushed through that will not only give the schools more money for counselors, but it will give more money for school resource officers. So there is a plan in place to do that. My plan right now is what we've been doing. One is I have an SRO in there. Two, we're going to be putting another SRO. Three, we are working with the schools. For you folks that are in the area, if you want to come to Calaveras High School tomorrow night, you'll see what we've got going on and what we're going to be doing for our kids. Remember, I have a child in these schools too. So it is very important to me, and as most of you know, or a good portion of you know, I was the school resource officer here for almost 4 years. So I have a vested interest in these kids because they are our future. So we do have a plan, and we are moving forward with that plan. Come tomorrow night and we can lay it all out for you. It's very entailed, very detailed, but we do have a plan to continue with keeping our kids safe in the schools.
I was aware you were getting another SRO, but as far as the question is keeping our children safe. So yes, that is of the highest priority because that is another public safety issue. I think we need more SROs, especially in the rural and the outlying areas of the county. Often deputies that can rotate from one school to another. The problem is we're short-staffed, so those deputies, when they're at a school, quite frankly, are going to get ripped off to go back up a patrol officer, go handle an in-progress call where somebody needs help at that moment. But that's okay because at least we'll have a deputy nearby the school closer to. So as far as, and the question comes up all the time, I'm asked this quite a bit, do you want to arm teachers? I do not want to arm teachers. I think that's a bad idea. I do not want to store firearms at the school. That's even a worse idea. I think we need to put SROs in the schools, have them rotate from school to school so people see that there are different SROs. At the same time, they need to be grounded with a school that they primarily work, so when there's a problem, they get to know the kids and the family and so on. I think part of the problem that we have is we're putting too much emphasis on, I don't want to say too much, but we put a lot of emphasis on the school and the sheriff's office to take care of the kids when it should be starting at home. And that's why school counselors and meetings and getting together with the families so they understand that kids can't do certain things at schools, and this is going to be the repercussions. But I think SROs in the schools and more of them is actually going to be the answer. And I'm not opposed to the idea of having retired police officers if they're appropriate, if they are willing to do so, and they're willing to put forth the effort and the time to do just that. Not just anybody though. I've had people come up to me and say, what about retired military people? I would rather have retired police officers because they're more familiar with the law. Like I said, if they are willing to do just that. So my answer is more SROs and more involvement than what we have right now, which understandably we are short on deputies, but that is the plan. Put more SROs and more deputies into the schools.
All right, the next question, we kind of ran them together because it kind of ties into what a lot of people have been talking about, the school safety issue, and I think you guys have explained that one. But the next one, it goes into CCW, and I know you guys have been asked this, it's probably one of the top questions you get asked all the time. This is the question of how it was submitted. Could each of the candidates explain their position on issuing CCW permits in Calaveras County? Could Sheriff DiBasilio explain why the threshold of obtaining and renewing a CCW has increased under his administration? Examples: 3 reference letters are now needed for new applicants. More cause than for the protection of myself and my family is now required to renew a CCW. And let's start. And Rick, you can start with this one because that way it was addressed.
Okay, first and foremost, my policy hasn't changed. The policy that I'm working off of right now is just that. It's a policy that's in the Sheriff's Department, and I looked this morning, and it actually was something that was enacted back in 2015. Nothing has changed. All I can tell you is that if Sheriff Kuntz wasn't following the policy, that was Sheriff Kuntz. I'm following the policy. The policy states that you supply 3 reference letters, and not on a renewal. It's on a new application, you supply 3 reference letters. Now, let's kind of take a look at what's been going on in the country. I personally don't think that 3 reference letters is a big deal. If somebody wants to take the time to go through the process of getting their certification through whatever gun company they go through the background checks, what's 3 reference letters? It does a couple of things for us in the Sheriff's Office. One, we keep talking about and we keep hearing on the news that all these mental health patients are getting access to guns. If I get 3 reference letters, it covers the county to say, okay, this person probably doesn't have a mental health issue. So it just is more, I understand that people don't want to have to submit a lot more to get their CCW, but in the long run, it's going to benefit all of us. If we all know who's carrying those weapons and that they're competent to carry those weapons, it shouldn't be an issue. But my policies have not changed. They're the same policies that have been in place since at least January of 2015. The other part of the question, needing more cause. I've never needed more cause. All you have to do is say that you want it for your own personal protection, period. That has never changed. So that information that's getting out there and the rumors that are going around are incorrect. So I'm a Second Amendment advocate, and I employ everybody to get a CCW if you so choose to and you want to go through the process. I think it's a great program that we have. It's part of our constitutional right, and I uphold that.
Yeah, go, Gary. It's there.
The process here in the county for getting a concealed weapons permit requires 3 letters. It is not state law, it is a local policy. Amador Sheriff's Office does not require 3 letters, El Dorado does not, Sacramento does not. It's not on the policy that's posted on the website right now. And my question is, if somebody supplies 3 letters, is anyone doing a background on those? How do we know that those are not fictitious letters? So self-defense, personal protection is good cause. It's a Second Amendment right to the U.S. Constitution, that right to keep and bear arms. If somebody meets the strict minimum criteria that the state has set forth, I see no reason why they shouldn't be issued a concealed weapons permit. Does that answer it? Thank you.
With regard to CCW, I can carry concealed by virtue of the fact that I'm a retired police officer. I've always looked at it this way. Just because I was a police officer, I don't see any reason why a person that's a truck driver, a doctor, a lawyer, whatever profession they were in, should not be able to exercise that same right and privilege. Now, there's 4 criteria that's outlined by the state for issuance of a CCW. And California is a may issue state. I look at it as this county, I would move towards more of a shall issue state or county. You have to have good moral character. That's covered by the background check. Second one is good cause. That's covered by the Second Amendment. I don't need to say any more about that. Firearm safety course, that's reasonable. And then you have to have the required residency here. And then the sheriff or the chief of police can put on any other reasonable restrictions that they want. Now, there's nothing in there about 3 letters of reference. As Gary mentioned, how do we know that those are correct? The person that's applying for it is the one that is responsible for the carrying and use of that firearm. That's all I ask. If they meet those requirements as set forth by state law, that person, upon receipt of a CCW permit from me as your sheriff, be a responsible gun owner, handler, and carrier. With regard to the mental health issue, I agree. That's part of the problem. The saying goes that people kill people, guns don't kill people. I don't think 3 letters is going to resolve that mental health issue. There are other steps in place with regard to identifying those people. Person could be issued a CCW and then develop perhaps a, however you want to characterize it, mental issue later on. Sometimes it wouldn't be a mental, I'm not a psychiatrist or psychologist, so I can't really speak to the diagnoses there. So I would stick by the criteria outlined in state law, look at it as a Second Amendment right if people so desire to carry concealed, and work towards making it more of a shall issue as opposed to a may issue. Thank you.
All right, since you've already got the mic out, should we just work from Pat on down on this next one as well? Okay, since you've already up and running. Now this one I think, was a little, we like this question. Question, how are you going to reduce property crime in a real way in a post-AB 109 world? And you guys mentioned that maybe AB 109 may not be the best wording of it, but not just blaming Sacramento, but a real action plan including concrete steps we can take to make Calaveras County safer.
Okay. The fact of the matter is that we have a crime problem not only with property crimes, but also violent crime in the county. Violent crimes are up. Rape is up 133% the last 4 years. Robberies are up. Aggravated assaults are up considerably. Now from 2014 to 2015, burglaries actually reduced, as did property crimes. But in the last 2 years, 16 and 17, both of those have increased. Burglaries increased about 17% in the last 2 years. And thefts, both misdemeanor and felony, increased about 5% in the last 2 years. So you can't blame AB 109 or the state or whatever else. You have to look at the problem that you have and develop a response to it. And first and foremost, I think that the reasonable response to it would be an institution of a real functioning community policing program here in the county. What that does, and I can elaborate it on later and perhaps another question, is it works with the community. Find out what the problems are, where the problems are. You also use crime analysis. You just don't throw your resources out there. You target it where it's needed, when it's needed, and when it's needed the most. That's how you're going to make an impact. You work with probation, you work with other law enforcement agencies, but as far as the sheriff's office, instituting that, neighborhood watch programs, those type of community involvement programs is what will make a dent in the crime problem. It has an impact, it can reduce it. I worked projects in Oakland when I was there. If we can do it in Oakland, we didn't cure all the problems there, but if we can do it there, we can do it here. Benefit that I see here is the overwhelming majority of the population in this county is in support of the sheriff's office and law enforcement in general. So we need to embrace that and work with folks. Something as simple as when you call in a suspicious person, how do you do it so that you get the information relayed to dispatch correctly and efficiently? Then they can get that call out to those folks on patrol to respond to your crimes there. Also, again, touching on crime analysis, that's where you're going to define, there's a concept called reality of crime versus perception, okay? For instance, if somebody has their house burglarized on a block, the word gets out pretty soon, people think, oh my gosh, everybody got their house burglarized, broken into. It's not the case. The reality of it is one person had their house burglarized, but everybody is in fear of it happening, and it just kind of takes on a life of its own. Again, you can thwart those kind of problems through real, functional, participatory community policing, neighborhood watch programs with the community. That's how we're going to solve those problems. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, unlike my two opponents here, I have the stats, and the stats from 2015 and 16 into 17 and 18 have been going down. I do have those stats in the office. I can bring those, anybody who wants to know them, I can show them to you, I can give them to you. The AB 109 is part of the issue. We have the early release program. These guys that are getting caught back up that are part of the AB 109, they're getting reincarcerated. They're out within 2 or 3 months. We're not being able to hold them because of the way the laws are read. Proposition 47 is another big issue. It reduced a lot of felonies down to misdemeanors. So again, a lot of these folks are getting out earlier than what they should be. One thing that I am doing at this point is we do have special enforcement teams. We do have a COPS program, and we do have a POPS program. Some of you read in the newspaper where we had the big methamphetamine bust up in West Point. That was part of a COPS POPS program. We had the big burglaries that were going on down at Lake Tulloch. That was part of a COPS POPS program. That's how we caught those folks. So we do have those programs in place. We have the neighborhood watch programs in place. So we are utilizing those things. We need to do more of it. I'm not stating that we don't. We need to do more. But those programs are in place. We are working them, and we are getting results. Our stats show that crime has gone down in this county. And this county is still one of the lowest crime-rated counties in the state of California, and I'm very proud of that. And a lot of that goes back to you folks, because you're the ones that are our eyes and ears out there, because of the neighborhood watch programs and the fact that you call in when you see something different. So please continue to do that. Thank you.
And not to disregard what my two opponents say, but when people talk about community-oriented policing and problem solving, sometimes it's mislabeled. It is not a program. It is a philosophy. And I equate it to, it's a way of approaching a problem. The way we've been doing it for so many years doesn't always work. So we have to approach it a different way. It's the same thing, like I said, I equate it to a diet. When you go on a diet, you lose weight for so long, and then what happens afterwards? You gain the weight back on. You've gone back to the way you've done it before. Where changing the way you eat from that point on is a healthy habit. So community-oriented policing and problem solving is a philosophy. It is a different way of approaching a problem. When I was a resident deputy in Arnold back in 1995, the sheriff told me, go forth and conquer. There are some bad people doing some bad things. So what I did was I went out and I targeted them. And I got so busy they had to put another deputy to answer calls for service so I could go out and continue doing what I was doing. And I told people, you're out making life miserable for these folks that live here, so I'm gonna make life miserable for you. That's my job. You have a choice. One is you're gonna stop committing crimes. Two is you're gonna move and go somewhere else. Or three, you're gonna start seeing me a lot more tickets, probation, jail, and if you get on probation, chances are you're gonna be searchable because it's a property crime, and I'm gonna come toss you. We're gonna come search your things looking for stolen property. I'm gonna make life miserable for you because that's my job. So when I talk about community-oriented policing and problem solving, putting a POP team, as Mr. DiBasilio said, that is the focus, to go out and target people and go after them. We always see, you know, in the news, we would see like a bank robbery and it would be all over the newspapers and it would be a big shockwave through the community. But what affects the community more is when people go and they hit 3 or 4 cluster mailboxes and everybody gets their mail stolen. Which is the highest priority? Well, which is one that affects people most? It's going to be somebody that's constantly committing crimes that is a drain on the community over and over, because it's usually a misdemeanor and it's lower on the totem pole. So when we talk about AB 109 and we talk about Prop 47, a lot of people don't realize what's going on in the state. These are called reformer laws. The state is pushing these laws down on us and giving them misleading titles. Public Safety and Rehabilitation Act. They are written right into the text of most of these laws. It says, because due to prison overcrowding. I've read them. Same thing with the Electronic Communications Privacy Act, SB 178. It now restricts us on our search warrants, what we can search for when we search a computer or search a phone of somebody that's been committing crimes, whether it's child pornography or drug dealing. The governor has publicly stated there are too many people in prison. That's where these laws are coming from. These laws are designed so people don't go to jail or they don't stay in jail. And when people start reading the laws instead of reading just the title and start voting for them, that's where we'll start seeing a change in the laws and how they're applied. Because, am I almost out of time?
Oh, you're just wrap it up.
Okay. So this is one of the issues I've had and one of the issues why I'm running for sheriff. So there is a voice from law enforcement to tell you this is a bad law. This is a bad policy. People don't vote for this because this is what it's going to do. So like I said, these are called reformer laws, and that's what these laws, the laws that are being pushed on us by the state of California, Prop 47, 57, poor people can now, it's unconstitutional for poor people to pay bail or try to afford bail when they're booked into jail. I don't know what defines a poor person versus somebody with a job or money, but this is one of the laws that's being pushed on us because they can't afford bail. This is silly. So these are the laws that are coming down. And law enforcement, we have a tough time dealing with this, but these are the laws that have been voted on by the people in the state. And now we're starting to see the repercussions. I've read articles where people in Southern California are leaving the state due to the high gas taxes and specifically Prop 47. So with that, John's given me the wrap it up. Thank you.
All right. Now the next one. The next question is the one that I think has been on a lot of people's minds. It's the cannabis question. But it's a little bit two-parted. Basically, could each candidate state their position on banning commercial cannabis and dispensaries in Calaveras County, include also how the department under your leadership will help maintain quality of life issues even with increased legality? So we have a ban in place now, but let's say it gets put on the ballot. So basically, and I'm also going to make this one a 5-minute question if you would like. So, so if you have issues and positions on this, get them out there. So this is the 5-minute question, and it's on commercial cannabis. One is, how do you feel on the banning of the commercial cannabis? And then part two, with the increased legality of it, and if, say, the county puts something on the ballot measure, whatever, how would you deal with it just as a quality of life issue and making sure that it can be, it doesn't degrade the quality of life in the county? So does that make sense? All right, want to start with that?
First and foremost, whether the county ban continues on or things change and we go to a regulatory system for cannabis, my duty as sheriff would be to enforce whatever law is in place regarding cannabis, despite my personal preference. Now, the question directly, and I'll answer it directly, is what is our personal feeling on it? I've made no effort to hide that I think the way to control the cannabis industry in Calaveras County is through strict regulation. I worked narcotics in the 90s. I did a lot of cases. Banning anything doesn't mean it's going to stop. Okay? So you have to look at what end result do we want? Do we want to control something, or do we just want to say we're going to ban it, therefore it's going to be gone, and more or less close our eyes or stick our head in the sand? So that's my personal feeling on it, but I want to make it absolutely clear to everybody here, if a ban is in place, as sheriff, I will enforce that ban. I've made no secret of that either. Now, what was the second part of the question?
Oh, the question is basically, with the increased legality of it, and if, you know, the quality of life issues, how would you help maintain quality of life even with increased legality?
Okay, say with increased legality, so let's say we go back under 64, that's increasing legality, adult use of marijuana. And if it is, a ban is removed and regulations put in place. Again, regulations, those are rules, laws that people have to go through. I don't know if anybody in here has any idea of the people that do abide by the regulations that were in place, the difficulty involved, the money that's involved, and everything else. So there are people that are willing to go ahead and do that. Now, the people I've spoken to kind of fall into three groups. One, I just want it gone. I don't care how, why, I just want it gone. Other folks say, well, I don't like it because it creates a problem for me, okay? People driving up and down the roads at high rate of speed, the smell, so on and so forth. So then I ask them, what would be your solution? And time again, it seems to be move it to an area that's not going to impact neighbors. That was part of the regulations before. I think they had it in allowed it in too small of areas. But I think that there's a way, if we go back to increased legality, and again, I'm just answering the question with regard to that, that there's a way to do it sensibly, that it would increase the quality of life. It would increase the quality of life for the neighbors around there. It would increase the quality of life for everybody at large because of the Measure C taxes that would be coming in. And that the third group of people that I've spoken to is they don't really care one way or the other. It doesn't impact them, so it doesn't matter to me. So they really have no say-so one way or the other. I think that pretty much covers it there. Thank you.
This has been an ongoing question for the past 2 years that I've been dealing with. And I've had a lot of people say that I'm riding the fence. Well, in a sense I am, because it's been stated before, and I'll say it again, law enforcement does not make the laws. You people do, and the Board of Supervisors. If you go back to the inception of all this in 2016, February, the Sheriff's Office and our District Attorney told the Board back then, ban it, do not allow it. The Board chose not to listen. In 2016 in May, when I got appointed the position, I told the Board then, and you can go back and look at it, it's on video, if you're going to regulate marijuana, do not put it in the residential areas. It's a bad idea. They did it anyhow. I have to, in my heart, believe that those 5 supervisors did not expect to get the influx of people that we got. I don't think anybody did. When they talked about it, they thought they were going to get a couple hundred growers. It was going to be able to be manageable. Nobody, and I mean nobody, expected 770 registered growers and then the influx of illegal marijuana growers that we got. So that's water under the bridge. But as your sheriff, I have been actively, as you well know, going after the illegal growers. The state of California said that marijuana is a legal product. The Board of Supervisors in Calaveras County said it's a legal product. So I did what I had to do under the law. That is, go after the marijuana growers that were growing illegally, and the ones that were registered, if they weren't following the rules, they got hammered, and we got rid of them too. So the bottom line is, there is no good solution to this. The damage has been done. Part of your question was the dispensaries. Being in the sheriff's office, I know for a fact we have 3 dispensaries in the county. We're not having issues with the dispensaries. They're on a different level. They stay in compliance. We do checks on them all the time. We have very, very few calls. The few calls that we had are somebody walked in and they walked out with some marijuana, petty theft. We're not having issues with the dispensaries. I'm not a doctor. Nobody has a legal right to tell somebody whether or not medicinal marijuana is good for them or bad for them. So I don't see a problem with our dispensaries at this point. I don't think they don't need to leave the county. But as it stands right now, June 10th of this year, commercial marijuana will be illegal, and I will deal with it as such. If some reason down the road we end up with a regulatory program, I will deal with it as such. It is a law. You cannot expect a sheriff, whether it's me or anybody else, to decide whose rights I'm going to encroach upon and whose rights I'm not going to encroach upon. If it's a law and a regulation, we as law enforcement have to abide by that. We have one candidate up here that is obviously very pro-marijuana, and we have another candidate who says he's for a ban, but he also said in a couple articles that I read that he's also for regulation down the road. Well, if we had regulation and it didn't work, maybe that's not what we need to do. But that's going to fall back to you people right here if something gets put on the ballot. But right now, it's going to be an illegal product, and I will deal with it as such.
So yes, I am the only candidate up here that stands before you that is pro-ban on all commercial marijuana activity in Calaveras County. I do not believe that it's good for the county, it's not good for the citizens, and when I hear we don't want it in residential areas, well, what about the people that live on 20, 30, or 40 acre parcels that have to live by it, that have to live next to it? They don't want it next to them either. They came up here, they moved up here, whether they've been up here for generations, or they just moved up here, they bought a piece of property and they bought a house to retire. They don't want to be around it either. They didn't move up here to be around it. They moved up here to get away from it. So we've had our previous Board of Supervisors was permissive in allowing it. And I've made no bones about it. I am pro-ban. I have made statements that if we come to regulation, I'll work with that. But I can guarantee you a lot of people on the marijuana side are not going to like my idea of regulation. But we're not there yet. For almost a year now, I've been on and off talking with the federal government and bringing the federal government to help us with enforcement, because the state laws are very lenient when it comes to prosecution of these crimes. Federal government still has what we call the big hammer, and I have no problem bringing them in to start helping us deal with getting some of these major growers out, starting with the big growers. There's one just south of Angels Camp by the Carson Hill Mine. There are 12 100-foot-long hoop houses that is being used for growing marijuana. It's those sizes, those large-scale marijuana growing operations I would start with the federal government, whether it's seasoned property, their money, or going after them for not paying taxes, whatever. I've spoken to them. They are willing to help us, albeit right now it's on a case-by-case basis, but it's a starting point. And it wasn't until after I announced my candidacy to run for sheriff on January 11th. After that is when Sheriff DiBasilio said he's talking to the federal government. He's had 2 years to do it and bring in the help. They're willing to help us. We have a new leader in the White House that's giving out money and helping local agencies. We need to get rid of the commercial marijuana activity in this county, and it's not about the money because this county is solvent. We have money. So the Measure C monies and things, we do not need that to balance the budget. And I'm sorry, John, what was the rest of the question? To keep the community safe?
Yeah, I mean, basically, and also include also how the Department of Leadership will help maintain quality of life even with increased legality. So basically, you know, if we have a odor, like a noise ordinance that applies to odor issues or something like that,
right.
that was the gist of it.
Well, if we remove it from the county, I think that's a big start. And a lot of people said, you know, they raise their hand, they say, well, you're not going to get them all. You're absolutely right. When was the last time we got every marijuana grower? When was the last time CHP got every speeder or every drunk driver? When was the last time we caught every burglar or every identity thief? We do what we can with what we have. And if we look at other counties that have filed a declaration of a state of emergency, I believe we're on the verge of that, or we should consider doing that as well. We are overrun at this point. All right, because it's been allowed to go on for 2 years. So enough of the hemorrhaging. We need to put a stop to the bleeding. We need to stop this silliness right now, and we need to get rid of the commercial marijuana activity and get it out of the county. Thank you.
Hey, John.
Yeah, you can remember. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, talking about the feds, I talked to HIDA, which is high intensity drug trafficking area. I talked to them a year and a half ago, and they told us they didn't have the manpower or the ability to help us. They don't have the funding to help us. The problem I have as a sheriff, if we have somebody in law enforcement that has contact with some Fed somewhere that is willing to come in and help, why hasn't that person been brought up and said, hey, let's help us? I've asked for the Feds for help. I was up meeting with the U.S. District or the U.S. Attorney the other day in Sacramento, and he's told me the same thing. There's not a lot of help available from the Feds because of what the state of California is doing. And I said this many times in many arenas, that if there is somebody out there that has somebody in the federal government that is willing to come in and help Calaveras County, please let me know. So I have an issue with somebody stating that the Feds are there to help us, but not offering up that help. Because I've asked, believe me. And it's been more than a few months ago. It was a year and a half ago that I started asking.
Did you? Yeah, and then we're gonna let this one go back and forth a little bit. We're gonna try to keep it straight, but I know this was where people really wanted to understand each candidate's position. So yeah.
I just want to address a couple things. First of all, Rick mischaracterized my position as pro-marijuana. I want everybody to be perfectly clear on this. Personally, I'm pro-regulation. As far as pro-marijuana, I've never used it, never intend to. Okay, so there's a big difference there. One can be in favor of regulating commercial growing and sales and everything else, but not be pro-marijuana as far as using it or advocating its use, anything else like that. The other thing, too, that was touched upon is I don't think people are going to like my idea, Gary said, of enforcement. Well, the thing is, we got to realize here, enforcement is dictated by what the laws are. Okay, so it's not a matter of a personal agenda or putting the screws to anybody or using the hammer, whatever jargon wants to be out there. It's abiding by the law, enforcing the law as it's written, and doing it fairly for everybody, and letting it go through the court systems if it's a criminal violation there. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, go ahead.
And to be clear, I didn't say they're not going to like my idea of enforcement. I said my idea of regulation. When the urgency ordinance was passed, the sheriff's office and law enforcement locally did not have much input because they were trying to pass it so fast. If we ever come to the day of regulation, and I hope we don't, I would hope that the voice of law enforcement is much stronger and much more detailed than what we had. The urgency ordinance that we have is now hopefully ending, was a miserable failure. All right? It did not address hardly any of the concerns that people in this county have. And when I talk about regulation, I talked about people are not going to like my idea of regulation. We need to have more of a voice and more input into what that regulation is. It needs to address issues. But again, we're not there yet. And hopefully we won't get there because we're going to stick with the ban. When I spoke to the federal government, I didn't speak to the HIDA. The HIDA is a task force specifically in Stockton made up of several federal agencies and several local agencies. They have a mission, and their mission is exactly that, high-intensity drug trafficking, monitoring and traffickers on the Highway 5 and Highway 99 corridor up and down the state and over towards Nevada. And they are not going to come up here and help us pull plants. I've been speaking with the ATF. The reason I spoke with the ATF, because they were referred to me because they've come, federal agencies or a federal agent had come to this county and they were told, no, we have this. I've spoken to Bill Rusamente. And the conversation was, they were asked for money. The HIDA doesn't give out money. You have to donate a body or two to the task force, then you have those resources available. People in this county want enforcement. They weren't getting it from the sheriff's office. Somebody knew a federal agent with the ATF. They contacted me. I did not reach out to them. And I've sat and I've met with them. I've also talked with the State Franchise Tax Board investigators because a lot of these growers, whether they're permitted or unpermitted, are not paying taxes. And if we find somebody who's not paying income taxes or paying any kind of state tax, why can't we submit a complaint to the State Franchise Tax Board for them to go after them? There's lots of other resources that are available. It's just not happening. So that's when I talk about outside resources of the federal government, there's also state agencies. All we have to do is reach out and ask. And it's not just about money, it's about investigations and getting those investigations, and that's where the big hammer comes from. Thank you. You
know this is a hot topic. I talked to Bill Rusamendi. He's the one I talked to about a year and a half ago, and he told me that he wasn't going to be able to help us. As far as your quality of life, I think that I've been doing a damn good job of getting rid of the illegal marijuana growers, because that was part of my job, and that's what I've been doing. We've been working on getting rid of them. We've been working hard down in the Valley Springs area, getting rid of all of the indoor growers. We have a lot of these folks that are leaving because they don't want to deal with the sheriff's office. The sheriff's office has been and will continue to be very active in getting rid of the marijuana growers. When it becomes illegal in June, we will take care of all of them. It's going to take a little bit of time. Anybody who thinks that they're going to be able to do this overnight is gravely mistaken. We are using the tax board right now. We actually have some of my detectives that are using the tax board, so we are going after their taxes for not paying their taxes. We've been working with Fish and Wildlife. We've been working with the Water Board. So we have been doing everything that we possibly can. You guys remember the Operation Terminus that we did last year. We're going to be doing that again this year. We are not slowing down. And when I hear people say that the sheriff's office is not doing their job, I have a real issue with that, because it's a proven fact. If you read the newspaper and see what we've been doing it. And I'm right there alongside of those guys, helping them to remove these plants, because that's part of my job as a leader and a mentor, is to work with our guys.
Everybody good? All right, okay. We wanted to let that one go a little bit and let it,
Okay, just a couple more points.
All right.
First of all, I think we need to be wary of federal encroachment. That's not something that we would arbitrarily or freely just invite the federal government in to enforce, help enforce, particularly state and county issues there. So it's something to keep in mind. The other thing is, I believe that the UO was not an abject failure. It was a work in progress. It was making progress. It just stopped short. It had much more room for improvement, but it was not an abject failure. It took us from, I believe, probably absolute chaos would be a good term, to some sort of regulatory framework, but now the ban is in place. That brings me to my last point. We could talk here until midnight tonight, and it's all really irrelevant, okay? Woulda, coulda, shoulda. If we have a ban in place, that's what gets enforced. Those are the laws that will be enforced. If we change it to something else, then at that time, it needs to be addressed. But right now, the ban is in place, and that's what we have to look at, is what is the outcome versus output. We can run around and do a bunch of illegal grows, but what's the outcome? Are we actually solving the problem? So use the resources that we have, target specifically those things that we can have an impact upon, and make sure that we are achieving that outcome of actually reducing, not just eradicating and pulling them out and moving on to the next one, but resolving the problem of the illegal grows in the county. Thank you.
Everybody good? All right. We want to let that one go and be a little more free form, because I know that, you know, we wanted to be able to have their say on it. Okay. Back to a little more, a little bit lighter, but longer, a little bit longer taking. This one was a good one, we thought. Is what is your 5-year plan for the department in concrete ways you can make it more efficient and responsive to community needs? And we'll just want to start with you, Craig.
As far as a 5-year plan, the sheriff's term is only 4 years, but to incorporate that, is number one, the priorities with the department right now is to hire more deputies. We are short-staffed. Even if we filled all of the allocated deputy positions right now, it's still going to be short, because the calls for service, overall investigations, right now is at kind of a brink. So my first priority would be retention and recruitment of deputies, to hire an undersheriff, because we haven't had an undersheriff in quite a few years, more correctional officers so we can staff the jail better and house more people in the jail. And I know we're short on dispatchers, where I think right now currently there may be one dispatcher short, but is to increase the number of staff in the department. That's first and foremost. Second would be to take care of those employees. Right now, the Deputy Sheriff Association negotiated a very good deal where they're getting a pay raise of total of 15% for this year, 7.5 this fiscal year, 7.5 next fiscal year. Deputies still want to leave. So for whatever reason, we have an issue with the county. We need more deputies, and we constantly recruit deputies that are right out of the academy. They come here for a year or two, maybe 3, and then they leave for greener pastures. I know I did that after almost 13 years. So what I would like to do is I would like to focus some recruiting efforts on hiring laterals. I spoke to a deputy from Contra Costa County who lives in this county. He would love to work here. They're on a different retirement system, and he would love to come to work here under the PERS system and work for this county and finish out 5 or 10 years. I don't know what kind of recruiting efforts are being done. I just know that right now it's not working. We need to hire laterals and not just focus on new trainees out of the academy, because they don't stay here. We need to have the deputies, and when I say deputies, I'm talking about all staff, but primarily deputies, invest in the county. Right now, when we hire a deputy, they come to work for the county, but if they don't have an investment in this county, they're not going to stay, especially if they have family in Sacramento or some other area. They're going to come here, they're going to get their basic post certification, work for another year or so, and then they're going to leave because it's better salary, better benefits somewhere else, what have you. I would like to see the county offer up more perks for the deputies to invest in the county. I know that the county right now offers a deferred comp. It's $25 a month. Why can't it be $100 a month? And then the county match that fund. So that deputy is now investing $200 in a retirement or 457. That gives the deputy, that gives that employee a reason to invest in this county and a reason to stay here. And those are the people that we need to start focusing on trying to hire. Recruitment and retention right now in the state of California is very hard, and I understand that. But I'd look in the PORAC magazine, I look in other publications, I don't see Calaveras County advertising. It's on the website, but we need to bring people into this county that want to live here and they want to work here. Thank you.
Actually, it's you. You want to go up or you want me to go?
Oh, go ahead.
As far as a 5-year plan, when I took office in 2016, I actually submitted a 5-year plan to our CAO then, which was Manuel. So I submitted one. I'm a businessman. I have a business background doing the hazardous waste industry, and you don't start a business without doing a business plan. So I did one, and I sent it to him. Part of it is recruiting and retaining new deputies. Part of it is getting new cars, because we had, between 2008 and 2013, we didn't buy any cars because we're in a financial crisis. So I put into my plan to start buying new cars, which we have been doing. New radio towers, new infrastructure for our radios. I don't know how many of you have cell phones in this county and know that they don't work in a lot of places. Our radios work the same way. They don't work in all areas. So we're in process right now of erecting a new tower up in the White Pines area. So that's part of the 5-year plan. As far as retaining and recruiting, I talked about that earlier. Getting the local kids. We just hired a young man who's now in the academy, whose dad was a lieutenant for us. What better person to have come to work for us than somebody who's invested in this county already? And that's what we've been focusing on. The 4 people that are in the academy right now, one of them I just spoke of, the other 3 are local residents. So we are, in fact, recruiting, and we will be able to retain these people because they have a vested interest in the county. I'm in the process of upgrading our jail staff. I just talked to HR yesterday, and we're going to be getting 5 more positions for our jail because our jail is understaffed also. Again, we went from a 69, 70 bed jail to a 140 bed jail. We needed more staffing. I already picked up 5 people last year, and we're hopefully going to pick up another 5 here very shortly. So we have a process in place. We've been doing it. It takes time. It takes anywhere from 18 to 24 months to get a deputy hired. So it's a time-consuming process. One of the other programs that I initiated was we have these kids that are 18 years old. They can go to work in the jail as an 18-year-old. When they turn 20 and a half, we can send them to the academy to become a deputy. So now we're taking people, again, that are vested in the county, that want to stay in the county, and now we make them a deputy. It gives them a sense of movement within the department and a sense of self-worth. So there is something in place, and we have been actively doing it. Our numbers are going up. Right now, with the 4 guys that I have in the academy, I will say I just had one quit. He went to Belmont for more money. But with the 4 people I have in the academy, I will only have 2 vacant deputy positions. So what's going to happen is I'm going to need to go back to the Board of Supervisors, because my opponent is correct. We are short deputies still. We are short from where we were back in 2005 and 6. They had what they called frozen positions. When we went into the crunch of 2008, 9, and 10, instead of letting us fill those positions or hold those positions, they eliminated those positions. So now they're completely gone. So now I have to go back to the board and request those positions back. But we are gaining ground. We have been gaining ground since I became your sheriff, and we will continue to do that. We started an incentive program. We get these kids that they get a hiring bonus. We're working on getting county employees a hiring or a sign-on bonus for somebody who becomes a deputy and they stay. They get a little bit of a bonus at their first year. They get a little bit more at the second year. So it gives county employees an incentive to bring people into this county. So we have something in place, and we have been actively doing that.
My 5-year plan for the sheriff's office has already started. It started when I announced my candidacy. The first step is to get elected, because if I'm not sheriff, then any 5-year plan I have is moot pointed there. We've talked about the personnel problem. Well, HR's told me that they have no problem with recruiting. It's the retention end of it. So we have to look at what the problem is there and how do we reduce that loss. We're never going to eliminate it, because people are retired. People will move on for various reasons to other agencies. But what's the root of the problem? Now, it's been touted before that it's money. Well, the DSA just got a raise. I had 2 deputies within the last month tell me that we make good money and we just got a raise. So that sort of deflates the money issue. Okay, sure, I'm not saying somebody wouldn't move on to make even more money, but that's not it. So what you got to look at is, what are those problems and how do you resolve them? What I would do is meet with every person in the sheriff's office. I've already been talking to some, and find out what they think the problems are, because just one person, particularly at the top, isn't going to know everything. Find out why people are leaving and what we can do to stop it. Now, I think that it doesn't rest with just money. There's a leadership problem in the sheriff's office. I alluded to before, there's a sentiment among many people that work there and the public at large that there's a good old boy system at the top. That'll change with me as sheriff. With leadership, it's not a matter of going out and pulling plants with people. It's doing your job so that the people that you work with, your subordinates, have the training, equipment, and the time to do their job to the best of their ability. So that leadership is a key ingredient to reducing that attrition there. Now, one of the other things I would do is institute a policy review. Look at everything that we have within the sheriff's office, what needs to be improved, what needs to be maintained. That's all within the first year. Look at reassessing the deployment strategy we have out there. As I talked about before, do we have the people out there when we need them most in the areas that we need them the most? We talked about school resource officers, the lack of deputies out on patrol there. Now, going into year 2 and 3, I'd want to have community policing fully implemented throughout the sheriff's office and functional. We would be using crime analysis. There's free programs out there. All it does is take the time of the people within the agency, whether it's a clerk or a technician, to input the data there so that you, with a few keyboard strokes, know what the problems are out there. And by the end of that 3rd year, I'd like to have an increase of 10% of the personnel across the board there. Now that involves going to the Board of Supervisors. My job would be to provide them with the most comprehensive and complete budget request. If funding's cut, I'm a professional. You will not find me kicking and screaming like a 3-year-old on the floor. I will come up with a better plan, one that they like, that we can get those personnel to show them why we need more people out there. Going into year 3 and 4, we'll have looked at and developed a program for fleet turnover so that not all the vehicles are at 200,000+ miles, that they're rotated out. That's a safety issue for the deputies there. It's a safety issue for the public. Somebody's trying to get somewhere and they can't because their car breaks down. We need to look at that. Training and cross-training needs within the agency. By that time, we'll have looked at that. Is everybody up to training on everything that they need? And then have that, develop that ongoing training program for all personnel, whether it's a correctional officer, a deputy, or a non-sworn person, a dispatcher, for instance. Look at equipment needs. Again, as I touched on it before, you need 3 things to be successful. You need people, you need money, and you need equipment. My job is to get those people that I'll be working with the best possible equipment out there. So by the time we go into year 4 and 5, we'll have reduced attrition. And then I would like at that point, at the end of 5 years, is to go back and ask for an additional 10% increase in personnel across the board. We've got to look down the road instead of putting our finger in the dike and trying to plug holes as they pop up. People are still leaving, okay? It makes no sense to train them and let them move along. We've got to find out what we can do to keep them here and make that a successful program. Thank you.
What? Do you have a, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just like to add one thing. The Sheriff's Office currently has 2 very good programs of recruiting local kids, Cadet Program and the Explorer Program. The only issue with that is it's from a very small pool from kids just within this county. The Sheriff is correct that it takes anywhere from 18 months to 2 years to train a new deputy from the academy to the time they're out on the street by themselves and they've reached the level of competency. But the time it takes to train a lateral, somebody with experience, is less than half of that sometimes. It depends on their level of experience and their training program. And that's why I think we need to put some energy and some effort into recruiting laterals. Recruiting people and hiring them, putting them in the academy is great because it brings them up and hopefully it does keep them here. But we want to look at people that want to come here, that have experience, they have families, they want to buy a house, they want to buy some property, and they want to work here. And I think we need to put some effort into that.
Just to be clear, we have hired laterals. We've actually hired 4 laterals, and I'm in the process of hiring another one right now. So that is a process that we're doing. I feel attacked when I hear that there's a morale issue in our department. My suggestion is, folks, don't listen to rumors. If you see one of my deputies or any of the people that work in my department when they're not in uniform, please, because they can't talk politics in uniform, you ask them. Make your own opinion. Don't listen to rumors. Anybody who has any type of a business or worked anywhere knows that Mama says you can keep some of the people happy some of the time, but not all the people happy all the time. You're gonna have people that are upset. But I guarantee you that if you ask any of my deputies or any of my correctional officers or any of my staff, if they want me there to back them up, I guarantee they will, because they know that I will be the first one in the door with them. So I don't think that there's a morale problem in my department. It's been better now than it was in the past 15 years that I've been there.
All right, we'll try to pick up the pace here a little bit and keep everybody on schedule. We're doing pretty good though. I mean, it's, thank you guys, thank you. All right, and this is kind of ties into that a little bit, and I know you guys have been asked at a lot of your town halls and stuff, what is your community deputy policy and how will you improve community relations and response in our communities? So it's basically the community deputy question or the community policing question. So let's see, who wants to go first on this one? All right.
Well, Sheriff Gary Kuntz started the resident deputy program. I know that it was in place when Mr. Stevens was a deputy, but that was back in 1995. Sheriff Kuntz started it back up, and it's a program that I have kept going. I think it's very important that we have a resident deputy program. We have 3 right now, and we're in the process of putting together another program that will fill the holes where we don't have people living, because we don't have somebody living in every district in our county. It's just, I mean, you can't tell them that they have to go live there if they want to work for us. So we have a plan in place to put another program together, but we do have the resident deputy. They're in charge of putting the neighborhood watch programs together. They're in charge of getting the meetings going. They are contacts. They do a great job out there. Along with the resident deputy program, we have a volunteer program that is next to none. Our volunteers in our community do vacation house checks. They do a roving patrol. When we had our school issues back in Florida, they stepped up to the plate and put on extra patrols. They did extra patrols in the schools as our deputies did. We made sure that every school had a deputy rolling through it along with that resident deputy. We have a resident deputy sitting right here in the crowd that works up in the Arnold area. They are out there for their community. They do everything they possibly can. When there's a problem in that community, they address it. When we have a potential problem in an area, the sheriff's office, we've purchased cameras. We have cameras in San Andreas. We have a camera going on up in Arnold, so that we can gather intel on what's going on, so that those resident deputies can, in fact, start gathering that information to attack those high crime rate areas. And again, our crime rate in this area is not as high as a lot of people think. One crime is one too many, that I give you. But we will get more deputies out there, and the more deputies we get, the more resident deputies we can put out there, so that we have 1 or 2 in every district. Again, it's a plan, it's a succession plan to put this program together. It takes time. When you have people leaving, we had one of our resident deputies that moved on. He went to another department. So now we have to get somebody else into that place. That's why we're short one right now. But it's going to happen. It's a very important and a very powerful tool to have that resident deputy there. And not only is the resident deputy just in that area patrolling, they also make extra calls to the school. So we're back to getting our kids safer in the schools, because that deputy can take the time, if he's in that area, to go by the school. Every district, we have 4 districts that we have broken it up to in the sheriff's office. Every district has multiple schools in it. So that resident deputy not only deals with the neighborhood watch programs, they can go into the schools and get to know who they're dealing with.
Who wants to go next? Yeah.
One of the first principles of a community-oriented policing philosophy is to reestablish a relationship with the community. That means the deputies getting out of the car, talking to business owners. And I'm not saying by any means that's not happening, but this is the question. They need to get out of the cars and go talk to business owners. They need to talk to residents. Somebody's out working in the yard, get out and talk to them. Reestablishing that communication. When I was a resident deputy, I spoke to all the homeowners associations, EPOC, which is the Ebbets Pass Property Owners Council. I spoke with several neighborhood watch committees, started a few up, and we did very well. The problem we had was the program itself didn't perpetuate, and it was a management issue. We had issues with the sheriff and the undersheriff and the lieutenant said, this is what we want you to do, and I went out and did it. Problem is they didn't tell the sergeant who was working every day, and he had no idea what I was doing. Okay, I'm going out and I'm arresting people, and for some people it may seem like a minor offense, but again, we come back to that quality of life, and that's somebody that's a drain on the community, and so I'm going after them. And what happened was, we had it out a little bit until they were educated by the management, no, this is what we want Gary to do. So it needs to be managed correctly. And I'm not going to speak to or in any way, shape, or form how it's being managed right now. I'm not in the office. But I do know that if it's not managed correctly, it will not work. And part of it is because it's a philosophy. It's a way of thinking, and it's a way of attacking the problem. And instead of just the random patrol of the deputy going out and responding to calls, deputies need to get out of the cars. They need to contact people. They need to contact business owners. They need to contact schools. and they need to establish a relationship, because for too long we've had this wall between the community and the sheriff's office, and it starts with the individual deputy. He is the boots on the ground, he's the eyes, he's the first line of communication that people come into contact with in their daily lives. And it should be that deputy who is establishing that contact, not the administration, not the sergeants. It should be that deputy. They need to be trained in it, they need to have an understanding of it, and they need to go out and live it. Thank you.
Community policing, primordial in policing, is something I'm very familiar with. Now, as far as the resident deputy program, when I was a police officer in Arizona, the county around us had it. The resident deputy was somebody that essentially was the only law enforcement. Perhaps there was a Arizona highway patrolman that lived nearby, and they were the go-to person for any law enforcement 24 hours a day. So I call it here a feel-good program or a name-in-only program. Again, what's that outcome? Do we have somebody there? Just because, and I've spoken to people within the sheriff's office, okay? It's ranged from we don't have a real program to it's a farce. For instance, I live in West Point. I don't, but this deputy. So I was tagged as the deputy, resident deputy for West Point. In reality, he spent most of his time in Valley Springs and in Copperopolis, and very little of the time in West Point. It was just because he lived there. As far as community policing, it is an agency-wide philosophy. Everybody has to buy into it, but it's just much more than getting out and talking to folks. Okay, there's a formula to it. It's called SARA, scanning, finding out what those problems are. Okay, and then that's working with the community, going to community meetings, talking to individual business owners, individual residents out there, seeing what those problems are, because the deputies and police officers don't always know what the problems are. They may think they do, but one issue that they think isn't good for that neighborhood, and it varies from area to area. West Point's problems are going to be different from Copperopolis, and so on. So then you analyze it. What are these problems? Okay, define, go through your crime analysis, go through your stats, define what that problem is. Then you develop a response to it. Then you implement that response. Is it working? That's the assessment part of it. Go through, did our plan of attack, so to speak, work? If it didn't, you reevaluate it, you come up with a new one, and you go at it again. Now, it also involves archiving those things so that the new deputy that comes in doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. None of that, to my knowledge, based on my inquiries, exists right now. So we can say all day long that we have a resident deputy program or that we have community policing. There was a quote in the paper that, well, we have community policing, but it's kind of behind the scenes. That's the antithesis of community policing. It shouldn't be behind the scenes. It should be out front, everybody involved, as many people as you can get involved, because they're in a partnership with the sheriff's office. That's how it should work. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to try to fit a couple more questions in, and we're kind of thinking for timing wise at 7:45. We'll kind of break, and you guys can get ready for your closing statements, and that'll give you, that will give you ample time. Maybe we'll go 7:50 or so, but let's try to get a couple more questions in. But that's kind of the timing. Make sense? All right. Okay. This was kind of one who I thought would kind of, maybe we were kind of thinking kind of a little bit of a lighthearted one to kind of break stuff up a little bit sometimes. What effective policies from other jurisdictions would you implement here? And this is something if you've seen something that works well in another area that may work here, that's you don't have to take the full 3 minutes on this one if you guys don't want to. We'll run down the aisle on this one. What effective policies from other jurisdictions would you implement here? Who wants to start? You got, yeah.
Okay, because I have experience in other jurisdictions, I can address this. I've already talked about it, community policing. That is something that will work here if it is done right. If it's set in place, if policy is developed, everybody in that sheriff's office buys into that philosophy, and that's where it starts at leadership at the top, that people will buy into it because they'll see it successful. Tyler and I worked together in Oakland. I was one of those with my arms crossed in the back of the lineup room going, you got to be kidding me. Then I saw how it started working, and it makes life easier. Has to do with not only just going out and arresting people and throwing them in jail, but linking people up with those other services out there. Maybe they have a homeless person living or hanging out behind their business. Maybe they have a neighborhood dispute that's not a crime problem. That's how that works there. In Oakland, we had what's called a beat health unit. There's been talk recently about, well, we'll bring in code compliance and we'll do all that other stuff. Oakland developed that. A guy named Sergeant Bob Crawford developed that in 1989 and gained national recognition, bringing in code compliance, PG&E, all those other folks, for things that the cops couldn't do anything about because it wasn't a criminal violation. They were putting liens on houses. They were all the stuff that they do as far as code compliance things. So that's what's going to be successful as far as bringing something in. Now, I touched on community policing and I talked about how you assess it. Now, before, I told you that crime stats are up. I was contradicted and said, no, crime is down. Well, for example, I would use this as an assessment of how we're doing with burglaries, with whatever program we have. In 2016, and these are statistics right from the sheriff's office, there were 173 burglaries in the county. By the end of 2017, there were 223. I think my handwriting's correct. That's an increase, that's not a decrease. So that's one of the things that we need to look at right there. How would we attack that burglary problem? Now, those aren't huge numbers as far as New York, Detroit, Oakland, but if your house is burglarized, it's a huge number. And there are ways to impact that, there are ways to reduce it. I know how to do it, I have the leadership skills and the basic knowledge to do it. Thank you.
Well, as far as policies from other jurisdictions, every department is different. Our sister counties, Tuolumne and Amador County, have different policies than we do because they deal with different things. Crime is crime, I agree with that, but the way that crimes are committed in different areas, like in Oakland, is completely different than it is here in Calaveras County. Even Amador is different than it is here in Calaveras County. The geography and the way that our counties are laid out are completely different. I'm in the process of putting together a tactical problem-orientated patrol, meaning that they're going to go out and target those areas that are being targeted by the bad guys. So again, I have something in place. It's being implemented. So things are moving in a forward direction within the sheriff's office. We talked earlier about having boots on the ground. I know for a fact that my deputies go in and talk to the people in the businesses. I see them walking down Main Street because I'm out running around too. And I go in and I talk to those businesses to find out, are my deputies coming in to talk to you? And yes, they are. That is part of that community-oriented policing. It's making the contact so that when something happens or somebody sees something suspicious, that business member or that community member doesn't feel out of place by going up and talking to the deputy because they already know who they are. So again, we have those programs in place and we are utilizing them at this time.
So what would I change, or what would I immediately like to look to change? First thing, I would like to streamline the concealed weapons permit process. It takes month to 6 months, 4 months, 3 months. It takes too long. It can be streamlined. The second I would look at is other jurisdictions are forming what are called homeless task forces. They're going out and addressing the homeless people that are in their communities and asking them, why are you here? Where is your family? What resources have you been exposed to? What resources are you using? Did you know we have resources? I know El Dorado's doing it, Tuolumne County was doing it, and I just had some information, I think yesterday, and I kind of verified it today. A lot of people that are homeless in this county are going to Sonora because they're talking about regulating commercial marijuana. So when we start getting rid of commercial marijuana, we're going to see, again, some of these other problems decrease here in the county. When it comes to crimes and stats, I don't have the stats. Crime is a crime. People are getting their things stolen, and I think once part of the problem is once we get rid of the commercial marijuana and the element it brings into this county, a lot of this will start to decrease. What I would like to do, and what the sheriff talked about as a POP team, is exactly that. You go out and you target people that are committing crimes. If you have a crime in a specific area, you go out and you target them. I know because I've done it. I did it as a resident deputy, and we had a very, very strong effect. It was very effective, and it got a positive result from the community. So these are the types of things that need to be done, and I'm not in any way disparaging the work of the deputies that are on the street. They're out right now working. 5 hours from now, 10 hours from now, 4 in the morning, whatever, what have you, they are out working. They're out chasing bad guys. They're the only ones out looking for trouble. So think about that. I just would like to see an increase in deputies, and I would like to start a homeless task force, and I would like to streamline the concealed weapons permit process in this county.
All right, and the next one. This one is how, and it'll be, each of you will answer this one differently, but how do each of the candidates feel they will be received by the many men and women employed by the CCSO if elected? Why do you feel this way? Be specific, and how can you improve the lives of deputies?
When I ran in 2014, I received the endorsement of the Deputy Sheriff's Association. Now, my understanding is they've changed their nonprofit status, so they can't legally endorse anybody now. But I've been in contact with folks that work in the Sheriff's Office, whether sworn or non-sworn. And now, I'm not going to tell you that everybody will welcome me with open arms. But by and large, I will be welcomed there as the new sheriff. Why? Because there's a lack of leadership. That's what people are telling me. Morale, this is directly from the folks that are working there that I've spoken to, is at an all-time low. This is not me just saying this. This is those people that work there. I've been a leader virtually my entire career. I know how to work with people. Part of leadership has to do with knowing your job, delegating that responsibility to the other people to let them do their jobs. I remember when I was a canine handler. Once I was promoted to sergeant, I didn't get to do all the fun searches anymore. That was the first step of me learning that you have to do your job. You can't keep doing all the fun stuff all the time. But you let those people that you're working with know that they're valued, that they're respected, that they're doing important work. Now I want to make it clear, when I talk about leadership and problems within the sheriff's office, I know that the men and women that are out there, the sergeants and the deputies that are on the road answering calls for service, are doing the best job that they can given the resources, the lack of personnel, so on and so forth. So I have no problem with that. Can we improve that? Absolutely. Their morale will increase under my leadership. I'll give you an example. When I was a sergeant, I worked the midnight shift, which is usually the worst shift. I worked East Oakland, which was one of the most dangerous areas in the city and one of the most dangerous cities in America. And I worked with the lousiest days off. And year after year, I had the same officers come back to work, not because they really liked that area, but they liked my leadership. They appreciated that. Now, I've also heard, well, there's a big difference between urban policing and rural policing. I say nonsense, okay? Now, are there differences? Yeah, there's differences between policing up in West Point and policing in Copperopolis. But if your house is burglarized, guess what? That's a violation of state law, okay? So it's the same crime, whether it occurs in a rural area or an urban area. Just has to do with the density of the crime problem. A murder here is still a murder. It still needs to be investigated properly, just like the hundreds we would have in Oakland. So, people concerned about that lack of rural experience. Number one, I did work in a small town, Flagstaff, Arizona. I was a foot patrol officer there. I knew people. So, I think people are fabricating issues, if you will, or trying to throw obstacles in a way. Leadership is leadership. Good leadership is good leadership, whether you work for an agency of 1,000 people, If I was the manager of a store with 1,000 employees, I could probably go back down and manage a store that has 100 employees. It would be more difficult, probably going the other way, but I feel confident that I will be able to do the job, lead a department, and be welcomed by the personnel that work there with open arms. Thank you.
And on this one, this question, so we don't get to the, could you keep the, so we can get the time rolling, let's not have back and forth on this one. So is it okay if Rick goes last on this one? So that way, just because I mean, yeah, does that make sense? Okay, all right. Sure.
Whether or not I would be well received by members of the department, I know by some, because they are welcoming, they are looking for a change in the leadership in the sheriff's office. Some may not accept me being in there. Okay, being a good leader does not mean you're going to make everybody happy. You're not going to make everybody happy. Being a good leader is not a position. It is a choice. And it's to have a vision and to take the department in a direction that's going to improve overall, not only for the employees in the department, but for the community itself. With all due respect to Mr. Garahan, this is not Oakland. This is Calaveras County. And we do have a certain lifestyle here, and we want to try to preserve it. Not only have I worked here, but I've worked elsewhere. I have that outside the box thinking without being an outsider. So when I talk, when I say would I be well received, according to some of the people that work in the department, yes, I would.
Well, again, like I told you before, you can't keep everybody happy. Anybody who thinks they can is mistaken. Owning a business, I had a trucking business and a hazardous waste cleanup business. I had a lot of employees, and there's always somebody mad at you because you're not doing what they want. But it's about leadership, and it's about mentoring. It's about showing people. And again, I got to go back to what I said earlier. If you have any questions about my leadership abilities or whether the people in my department like what I'm doing, talk to them. Don't listen to anybody else. Get your own opinion by going right straight to the horse's mouth. I can tell you that my administration, my jail staff, my deputies, my clerical staff, they like what I'm doing. I don't know who Mr. Garahan is talking to. Obviously, it's maybe the one or two that aren't happy with me. Again, I can't make everybody happy. That's not my job. My job is to lead them and to mentor them and have a succession plan so that when people retire, there are people that are ready to move up. I want to touch a little bit on the good old boy comment that was made earlier. There is no good old boy in the sheriff's office right now. There may have been in past times, but there's not now. I can tell you for a fact that I have one of my very good friends that tested for a position and he did not get that position because he was not at the top of the list. So there is no good old boy. I go back to when I had my own business, if you do the job, you get rewarded. If you don't do the job, you don't get rewarded. And again, talk to the deputies, talk to the staff, and get your own opinion. Please don't listen to rumors.
All right, let's see, 7:42. Should we try to sneak in one little quick more before closing statements? Think we good?
Your house.
Yeah, but I mean, this, you know. How's everybody doing? Is everybody good? Yep. All right. Sanctuary. Oh, what was that?
Ask something about sanctuary.
Got it. Let's tie that into then. We didn't know we were going to get to it on the list. Let's do the sanctuary city one, but also I think that ties into the state of Jefferson thing, because I mean, you know, like local jurisdiction stuff, state of the sanctuary city one. So I didn't have a question ahead of this one, but let's, what's your guys' policy on state of Jefferson and also tying into that localized control over things like state of, sanctuary city issues and things like that? So I don't know if that's probably not worded very well. Let's pick one or the other. Let's do sanctuary. All right, with California being more of a sanctuary state, how is your policy of dealing with the feds and ICE and things like that? You know, I don't think that's a huge issue here. It may or may not be, but let's run down through that one. Who wants to start? All right.
So again, this is one of those laws that the state pushed on us that we didn't like, we don't like, but unfortunately we have to deal with, SB 54. The law, SB 54, limits our contact with federal immigration when it comes to immigration issues. It's not like it used to be. So we are, in a sense, almost handicapped when it comes to if we apprehend somebody who's an illegal alien and they're convicted of a certain crime that's listed, specified in the code, then we can contact ICE or Homeland Security to come and pick them up when their current sentence is over. If the case is dismissed, and if it's a violent felony and the case is dismissed, we're not allowed to contact ICE and tell them that this person is being released. There is a loophole in SB 54, and it's going to be exploited, but when it comes to, and that'll be coming hopefully soon, but when it comes to, and I've been saying this since day one, ever since the state passed this law, there's going to be a showdown between the federal government and the state of California. And the showdown has started with the federal government suing the state. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that the court is going to rule in favor of the federal government, especially in light of what happened in Texas. So what's going to happen is the state's going to rule in favor, this is my opinion, state's going to rule in favor of the federal government. State's going to appeal it, ask for an injunction, and try to drag it out. I believe that's what's going to happen. But we have federal law on our side on this issue. It's a bad law. It's something that doesn't benefit the people in this county, doesn't benefit the people of this state, and I think it's probably going to get overturned. When? I don't know. But I see the showdown coming to a head. I don't know how long it's going to take for the federal government and the courts to rule in favor of the federal government, but it's going to happen.
Well, SB 54 is very problematic, and I have been actively working with the other 57 sheriffs with the State of California Sheriff's Association to get that changed, along with some other advocacy groups. They are working on it. As Mr. Stevens said, it is in the courts. I think the federal government is going to repeal it, but right now we have to deal with what it is. And again, there are certain times that we can contact the federal government, being ICE, to deport somebody. The benefit that we have in this county is that we don't have those types of people here causing those types of crimes. So it is a benefit for us. It's not impacting us. Fresno County, San Mateo County, San Joaquin County, some of these bigger counties, they have ICE embedded in their jails. They have a lot of those issues. We don't have those issues up here, thank God. But I think the federal government is going to repeal it. I think the state's going to find themselves in a very sticky wicket, to say the least. But right now, there's not a whole lot we can do. Again, it's a state law, and we have to do with what the state law says. I think it is going to get changed down the road.
Prop 54 deals with the cooperation and communication between local, state, and federal agents when it comes to immigration issues. It actually has nothing to do with local law enforcement enforcing immigration law. There's two parts to that. Somebody crosses the border illegally, that's a criminal offense. That's for a federal agent to take somebody into custody. The other one, where they overstay a visa or we cannot prove that they came into the country unlawfully, that's a civil action. It can result in deportation. So it has nothing to do with arresting them. It has to do with the communication, and I believe the state's legislature's misguided efforts to provide protection to people that don't need protection because they're criminals. Now, there's 31 different offenses that do allow for communication. Well, if you've looked at the penal code, it's about that thick. There's a whole lot of other laws that people can break that we wouldn't be allowed to contact the ICE agents and tell them, hey, this guy's getting out of jail because the case was dismissed or whatever else, but he's in violation, it's within your jurisdiction, come on down and pick him up. Now, we just heard that we don't have that problem here. Well, to say that there's no illegal aliens, undocumented workers, whatever term or euphemism we want to use in Calaveras County, is, again, closing our eyes, putting blindfolds on, or sticking our head in the sand. So even if we have one person that's here illegally, we still need to be able to do that cooperation with the federal agents. Now, feds have come in, or I'm sorry, Department of Justice, U.S. Department of Justice has come in, filed suit. Fifth Circuit in Texas just ruled in favor of the federal government. And, well, I'll go and speculate also. I think in this case, because immigration falls squarely in federal jurisdiction, I believe that the U.S. DOJ will prevail in that case, and that we'll see, if not an outright repeal, but severe modifications to Prop 54. That restriction of communication and cooperation, it's bad for law enforcement, it's bad for investigations, and most importantly, it's bad for the public at large. If we're letting people out there that are continual criminals, everybody's seen it in the paper, deported 5 times, finds a gun, kills a young lady, deported 3 times, whatever, drunk driver, kills. Those are problems. There are tools in place. We don't need to be restricted. We need to be able to use whatever we can to the best of our ability to handle those crime problems. Thank you.
All right. Now you guys are going to stick around for a few minutes for the questions we didn't get to, because you kind of want to, because I know there's questions we didn't get to. And I know there's some that were submitted we didn't get to. I have one here now that I was hoping to get to. This was on property seizures for drug houses, that type of stuff. We didn't get to that one. Wanted to give you time here to kind of do your closing statements, 3 to 5 minutes on those. And also there was one other little question that was submitted that I think may be a preface to some of your closing statements that we can kind of incorporate the two. Every election cycle, candidates claim the election is very important for Calaveras County. So specifically and concisely, what makes this sheriff's election uniquely important? So basically that's kind of, maybe you can tie that into your closing statements and stuff like that too. I thought that might work, but so I guess we're ready to go. Whoever wants to start first, whoever wants to go, and then we'll go run there.
Go ahead and repeat the question, please, John.
Basically the question was, this is a preface to your closing statements, so we can kind of tie them together. Every election cycle, candidates claim that the election is very important for Calaveras County. So specifically and concisely, what makes this sheriff's election uniquely important? And I think tying into, your motivation to run and stuff like that, and I think that ties into the summation, so maybe we can kind of make this a combination closing statement. Is that fair enough? Okay. Closing statement, and that was kind of the last question too, if we can.
Okay. I've lived in Calaveras County for 26 years. I'm heavily invested in this county, raised our children here. Some of my grandchildren live here. Some of my kids still live here. I'm involved within the community. I am the president of the Jenny Lynn Veterans Memorial District Board of Directors. I'm the vice chair of the Calaveras Consolidated Fire District Board of Directors. I formerly sat on the board for the Resource Connection. I'm a member of the West Calaveras Rotary Club. I'm the community service chair there. I'm also the Calaveras County Marine Corps Toys for Tots coordinator for the entire county. Member of the Chamber of Commerce, and there's some other things, but I'll move on for the sake of time here. I ran for sheriff in 2014. I wasn't elected, but I did have a great deal of support at that time. And that support has continued to increase since then. I've had many people come to me and ask me to run for sheriff. So my wife and I talked it over, and after giving it much discussion and thought, I felt that I owed it to the people that were asking me to run. So here I am. Now, conversely, some people have asked me, why would you even want to run for sheriff or any office given the state of the county? Answer simple. I can help improve things here. Now, as sheriff, I'm a professional, and I'll set that professional tone and imbue an attitude of public service to the people. The sheriff's office needs to be viewed as a public service agency. We exist to provide a service to you, not to make your life miserable, not to put the hammer down, Not saying some bad guys don't need it occasionally, but that shouldn't be the overarching thing. It's to help protect you and help you maintain your quality of life living here in Calaveras County. I think everybody loves living in this county. That's why we're here. You're invested in this county, just that's why you're here tonight. One of the things that I want to make perfectly clear too, and I've touched on leadership time and time again tonight. Both Gary and Rick have been quoted in the papers as saying that the sheriff is a figurehead. Absolutely disagree with that. Now the undersheriff, that's, if you've been in the military, it's like an executive officer. They handle some of the administrative stuff, discipline, and so on and so forth. But the sheriff is not a figurehead. It is a constitutionally mandated by the California Constitution office. I will not be a figurehead. I will be the one, as your sheriff, to fulfill that role, to run the sheriff's office, to work with everybody that's employed there to the best of my ability, and to provide the best service we can to the citizens of this county and the people that come and visit here. Now, was there something you stuck in just before the other question?
Oh,
Let me check.
let's see.
The actual question is concerning.
Yeah, the every election cycle, candidates claim the
Okay.
election is important for the Calaveras County, so specifically emphasizing what makes this sheriff's election uniquely important.
Okay. I firmly believe that every election is important. We have rights and privileges in the United States of America and the state of California that many others throughout the world don't have. So this is an important election. It's important for me, but it's important just like every other election. Now, what I would say is that this will not be an election of the lesser of three evils. In other words, well, this guy's not as bad as the other two. When you look at my experience, my expertise, my education, my leadership skills, my practical leadership skills, not conceptual, not something that I've talked about, things that I've actually done, my track record, if you will, I think you'll agree with me that I am the clear choice to become your next sheriff. Thanks for your time and attention here tonight. I look forward to your support, look forward to your vote, and again, thank you.
So again, thank you everyone for coming tonight. When we're done, I'll be over at my table in the back towards the bathrooms at that corner of the building. Thank you again for coming, and thank you, John, for putting this on. So in closing, like I said, I've lived here almost 30 years. My wife grew up here. I've raised my family here. My kids go to school here. I worked here. I also worked somewhere else. That's something that neither of my opponents can say, that they've worked here and somewhere else. I bring a unique experience to the job of the Sheriff of Calaveras County. And part of that is my expertise in investigations. In 2014, I was awarded the Outstanding Investigator of the Year Award by the California District Attorneys Association in California for a homicide investigation I conducted. It took 2.5 years. I didn't know it at the time, but other DA's offices said, you'll never make the case, let alone get a death penalty. I made the case. And that person is serving life without parole. And because of the great detail that I went into, one of the issues we have here in the county is there's one DA investigator to do follow-up on all of the major crimes that come to the DA's office from law enforcement. Okay, that's overwhelming. I used to be very critical of the DA's office when I worked here, and I was critical of the DA's office when I worked in Amador County Sheriff's Office. I didn't understand the challenges that are faced by prosecuting attorneys until I started to work for the DA's office. New witnesses come up. Sometimes more defendants are identified. Sometimes evidence is not analyzed. This is what I do for a living. So one of the issues, or one of the skills I bring to the office is I can increase the awareness of deputies in those investigations and what's presented to the district attorney's office for prosecution. Because far too many times we hear, this case was plea bargained, this case was plea bargained, or they got off on a lighter sentence or a lighter charge. The DA's office can only work with what they're handed, and that level of investigation many times is only probable cause. So to prevail in court, we need what's called beyond a reasonable doubt, okay? And that's what I do every day. I go into much more detail in investigations, not necessarily cold cases, but I bring those cases up and we get them ready for trial, and we have a very high prosecution rate. I want to bring that here on the deputy side. I want to be able to bring some of the skills that I have, that I've learned, and teach and mentor some of these deputies and other people in the department to be able to do the same thing. One of the skill sets I have is I'm a latent fingerprint examiner. Okay, we don't have one in the county. And what I'd like to do is get some of the people in the department trained to be a latent print examiner. Why? Because the State Department of Justice takes anywhere from 1 or 2 months to 8 or 9 months to do a comparison on a fingerprint. If we go to a burglary or we go to a different type of investigation where we lift fingerprints and we think it's this guy, we have to wait that long, okay? Where what I do right now, sometimes we make that identification in a day or less. That's just one aspect of, like I said, of the investigations and bringing up investigations to a higher level. And I'm not saying that they're not doing good or they're not doing good investigations, but sometimes it's not sufficient enough for the prosecuting attorney to take it right to trial that day. So this is just one of the skill sets that I bring to the office. The deputies, the community, a lot of people in this county are looking for a change. And a lot of it has to do with marijuana. We've had a permissive attitude regarding commercial marijuana activity in this county. I don't have a permissive attitude, all right? I want the ban, I want the dispensaries, I want it all out of Calaveras County. You'll see certain crime rates go down. I have the experience in dealing with targeting people, community-oriented policing, and narcotics. I work narcotics in this county. I work marijuana grows, cartel marijuana grows, and methamphetamine labs. I also made undercover buys in this county as a deputy. I've done a lot, I have a lot of experience working in this county, and because I've worked outside of the county, I bring that added skill set to the office of the sheriff. I ask for your vote, I ask for your support. Thank you very much.
Well, I want to thank everybody again for coming, John for putting this on, and the other folks that are here with their cameras. To reiterate, I've been in this county for almost 40 years. This is the only department that I've ever worked at, but I've been working with the other 57 sheriffs throughout the state of California. Since I've been your sheriff, I started a mental health court and a team that allows behavioral health specialists to work with deputies in the field and respond to the deputies' mental health calls when a person's in crisis so they can avoid going to the emergency room or to jail. I'm currently working with other sheriffs to improve the safety of the citizens of California and Calaveras County by fighting to get certain laws reversed, one of them being SB 54, the other one being AB 47, which is, if you all remember back in 2014, was the Safe Schools and Neighborhoods Act. What that did is it took certain felonies and dropped them down to misdemeanors. It took theft from $950 down to $400. So these guys are walking into Walmart and they're walking out with a TV on their shoulder because they know they're going to get just a slap on the wrist because it's a $850 TV. So I'm actively working on getting some of those laws replaced. In 2006, I was a school resource officer of the year for the state of California. And as the SRO, I'm still working actively with the schools for school safety beyond just the SRO program. I'm looking to strengthen and secure our schools so that our kids are safe. Again, my kid goes to school here too. I've established good, solid working relationships with the county departments, CHP, Angels Camp, Fish and Wildlife, Bureau of Land Management, a lot of agencies. I have worked hard and diligently to enforce that relationship that was shattered for quite some time. I've also been involved in numerous community and nonprofits here in the county. I'm part of Angels Murphy's Rotary, part of the NRA, I'm part of Angels Gun Club, numerous clubs in this county. And I've been in these clubs long before I was a sheriff. I don't do it just because it's sheriff season. I've personally been supporting our kids at the county fair for years, buying their animals. And prior to being a deputy, I was doing that. I was buying animals and stuff back then. I've been going to the county fair. I've been coaching the youth in this county for years. I started out as a softball coach back in the 80s. My wife and I started a traveling volleyball team. My wife still coaches here in the county. I still coach. In fact, tomorrow I have to go coach because she's taken our daughter to Houston, Texas for a volleyball tournament. So I'm still coaching actively. I'm an advocate for physical fitness. I want our deputies and our youth to be strong and to continue to be healthy. I'm ahead of my opponents who would have to build those relationships that I spoke about earlier, and I'll continue to grow those relationships and strengthen them to continue moving this county in a forward motion. I'm the only candidate for sheriff that's currently real life experience working for the sheriff's office and with the other 57 sheriffs to make crime, or to combat crime and to make our community safer. I'm the only candidate with real-time experience who is actively working right now to keep our schools and our children, our senior citizens, and all the community members and visitors in Calaveras County safe. Again, tomorrow, come and join us. We have that panel that's going to be talking at Calaveras High School on how to keep our community safe. I'm involved in that. You've heard numerous issues tonight, and I'd like to reaffirm a few things. Department morale. Please, please talk to deputies, talk to my staff members. Don't take it from anybody else. Talk to the horse. Being a sheriff means working as a team with the citizens and other county departments and employees. Mr. Garahan stated that I said that the sheriff is just a figurehead. I've never said that. The sheriff is just a figurehead. I am a team leader. I work with my teams. I'm out in the field as you've seen me out in the field with my teams. I have 3 points that I want to point out to you. As your sheriff, I'll protect the residents of this county. I'll supply, support, and train the men and women of the sheriff's office so they can serve you better. And I've been moving the sheriff's office forward in a positive direction since I became your sheriff almost 2 years ago. And in closing, I want to share a short story with all of you. I was at a dangerous high-risk search warrant where our SWAT team was securing a home that had a violent gang member. This is down in Copperopolis. Some of you may remember this. I watched one of our female deputies grab a baby and carry her away, putting her body between that baby and the danger. It's the moments like that that make me most proud of the Sheriff's Department and its employees, and it makes me most proud to be your sheriff. I respectfully request your vote on June 5th. Thank you again for coming tonight.
Thank you so much for coming, and thank you for submitting your questions. We'll have this, Ed's going to have a higher quality video up than we will, but we'll have ours up, probably the replay probably up by in the morning. Thank you for sitting. And how about let's give all three of these candidates a great hand. It's an honor to see the quality of people that come out for our local offices, and thank you very much, and have a great night, and they're going to stick around for some questions.